terrible losses, bad equipment, poorly trained soldiers getting slaughtered by drones. That's the devastating reality of North Korea's participation in the Ukraine war, one of the biggest military fiascos of the 21st century. While Kim Jong Un promised to show the world the power of his army, the truth that came out of the battlefields was very different. North Korean soldiers trained with 1980s tactics went up against the most advanced military tech on the planet. The result? A historic humiliation that exposed all the weaknesses of Pyongyang's regime. And this could trigger a devastating crisis for Kim Jong Un. An unprecedented and dangerous crisis. You're watching The Front. And today we're breaking down one of the most embarrassing episodes in recent military history. Kim Jong Un's regime carefully hid the truth about the young men it sent out. They got Russian uniforms, fake documents, and were told to pose as Siberian soldiers. Most had never seen real combat, never operated modern gear, and, even more shocking, many had never fired more than a few dozen bullets during their entire military training. Lee Chol-un, a North Korean defector who served in the army for more than 3 years, revealed a devastating reality. "I think I only fired 3 bullets a year," said Lee Hyun-sung, who also served for over 3 years, when he transferred to a more elite unit. He said, "We had about 20 bullets for training the whole year." Now imagine these same young guys, with that minimal prep, being thrown against Ukrainian forces armed with drones, precision artillery, and decades of experience in modern warfare. It was like sending medieval knights against battle tanks. But the biggest shame for North Korea came when the first shipments of its ammunition arrived at Russian depots in September 2024. Veteran Russian artillerymen immediately realized something was terribly wrong. Shells that were supposed to explode just bounced off the ground. Missiles that were supposed to hit targets miles away blew up just a few feet from their launchers. Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, confirmed that about half of all shells sent by North Korea were completely defective. Because of this, Russian soldiers started reporting that their own cannons were exploding due to the poor quality of the North Korean ammo. Victor, a 34-year-old Russian gunner, lost 3 fingers when a 152mm North Korean shell blue opened the barrel of his howitzer. In an intercepted call, he vented, "These Korean rounds are more dangerous to us than to the Ukrainians." The problem wasn't just technical, it was systemic. The shells arrived without the necessary ballistic tables. Russian soldiers had to figure out by trial and error how to use ammo that often hurt more allies than enemies. This wasn't just technical incompetence, it was negligence. The North Korean regime was literally selling weapons it knew were defective, turning its own allies into victims. Kim Jong-un was 18 when he set foot in Ukraine in November 2024. Raised under a doctrine preaching North Korean racial and military superiority, he truly believed that the weak Westerners would run at the sight of Kim Jong-un's invincible army. The reality was brutally different. All North Korean recruits are taught a song that includes a verse about saving their last bullet for themselves to avoid capture. An ex-soldier told NBC News, "This psychological prep for suicide, disguised as military honor, shows the toxic mindset these young men were programmed with." The first weeks of combat brought more than 1,000 North Korean casualties in just 7 days, according to December 2024 data from U.S. officials. What makes this tragedy even more painful is how these young men lost their lives. Ukrainian reports describe North Korean soldiers trying to advance in tight formations, like they were marching in a military parade. These included one soldier who blew himself up with a grenade rather than be captured, and others who ditched their helmets and heavy body armor to move faster while attacking Ukrainian positions. But while the world debates military stats and geopolitical consequences, a silent tragedy is unfolding in North Korean homes. Mothers who sent their sons to what they thought was military training got nothing but posthumous heroism, certificates from a regime that uses family grief as propaganda. Families of North Korean soldiers captured in Russia will be executed. A former North Korean soldier warned ABC News. This revelation adds another cruel layer to the tragedy. Soldiers who survive and get captured not only lose their freedom, but doom their families to death. Former soldier Ryu Song-hyun, who weighed only 110 pounds when he defected, admitted something shocking. If he were still in the North Korean army, He too would have wanted to go to Ukraine. If I went to Ukraine, I'd finally eat decent food, he revealed, exposing the chronic hunger that pushes many soldiers to accept missions like this. For the families of these soldiers, the situation is impossible. If they cry for their dead sons, they're branded traitors. If they don't, they're branded inhuman. The regime has even turned mourning into a political crime. To fully understand this tragedy, we need to look at how North Korea prepares its youth to become disposable war material. Since childhood, North Korean kids are taught that dying for the regime is the greatest honor. That capture is worse than death, and that the outside world is full of demons waiting to torture them. This indoctrination explains why North Korean soldiers kept attacking Ukrainian positions even as they watched comrades get massacred. They weren't being brave. They were being obedient to psychological programming that replaced survival instinct with blind obedience. The most disturbing part is that many of these soldiers were killed while genuinely believing they were saving the world from evil imperialists. Their last words, according to intercepted communications, often included shouts of glory to the great leader, even as Ukrainian artillery hit them. The most devastating moment for these young soldiers came when they finally realized the truth about their situation. Captured soldiers reported that at first they thought Ukrainians were weak, cowardly American puppets who would run at the first shot. Reality hit them like a runaway truck. Ukrainians not only fought back, but fought with superior equipment, superior tactics, and most importantly, they were fighting for their own homes and families. A captured North Korean soldier, identified only as Soldier 4321, revealed during interrogation, on the first day, I saw a Ukrainian drone kill 5 of my buddies in seconds. We'd never seen anything like it. Our commanders told us drones were useless Western toys. I realized our commanders were either idiots or liars. This discovery that their entire education, training, and worldview were based on lies was more psychologically devastating for many soldiers than the combat itself. While thousands of young North Koreans died on foreign soil, Kim Jong Un was busy turning this tragedy into a domestic propaganda opportunity. Kim Jong Un said his heart aches for North Korean soldiers killed fighting for Russia, in a rare admission of losses. But behind the emotional rhetoric, the regime's cynical math was clear. Each dead soldier was worth about $50. 000 in Russian payments, plus access to advanced military technologies. The regime was literally selling the lives of its young citizens for money and tech. In a grotesquely staged ceremony, Kim Jong Un awarded posthumous medals to 100 heroically fallen soldiers, a number South Korean officials say was brutally understated. In reality, the regime didn't want to admit the true scale of losses, to avoid revealing its own military incompetence. The cruelest part of this manipulation was how the regime painted unnecessary deaths as glorious sacrifices. Soldiers who died because of faulty equipment were called heroes who chose death over defeat. Soldiers who killed themselves to avoid capture were called supreme examples of loyalty. Even though global focus is on military stats and geopolitical implications, there's a consequence that could last decades: the psychological trauma of surviving soldiers and shattered families. North Korean soldiers who returned came back not only with physical wounds, but with a deep existential crisis. They discovered their entire worldview was wrong, that their country is much weaker than they thought, and that they were used as disposable pawns by a regime that claims to love them. One defector who managed to escape during the war revealed, when I saw Ukrainian soldiers sharing food with civilians, I realized everything I'd been taught about the West was a lie. They weren't monsters. We were the ones acting like monstrous invaders. For North Korean families, the trauma is even more complex. They lost their sons, but can't grieve publicly. They know their sons died needlessly, but must celebrate them as heroes. This psychological dissonance could have long-lasting effects on North Korean society. While families wept and soldiers were cut down, Kim Jong Un got exactly what he wanted: access to advanced Russian military technologies. Russia, desperate for ammo and manpower, offered multiple warhead ballistic missiles, S-400 air defense systems, and know-how on submarine nuclear propulsion for a country technologically isolated for decades. That intel represents advances that could have taken decades to develop on their own. But the haunting question behind this deal is, how many lives were those technological gains worth? Experts estimate North Korea may have shortened its ICBM development by 10 to 15 years thanks to Russian tech. This could make the country an even more serious nuclear threat to the US, Japan, and South Korea. But the price paid was extraordinary, between 4,000 and 5,000 casualties, international exposure of military weaknesses, and the destruction of the invincible army, image the regime spent decades building. The most devastating moment for many North Korean soldiers came when they realized they weren't liberating Ukrainians from American imperialism, but invading a country defending its own existence. North Korean soldiers thought their deployment to Ukraine was just an exercise. Newsweek reported, many only realized it was real combat when they started getting wounded and killed. Imagine the confusion and terror of these young men when they realized the training rounds they were getting were lethal. A captured soldier revealed in interrogation, "When I saw my friend Kim Sung-ho die with his stomach ripped open by shrapnel, I finally understood this wasn't training, but it was already too late to go home. We were trapped in a nightmare our own government created." This revelation broke many soldiers psychologically before the actual combat even began. The deepest tragedy in this story are the voices we'll never hear, the North Korean families who lost sons but can't publicly speak about their pain. In a society where unauthorized mourning is considered treason, mothers, fathers, and siblings suffer in silence. One mother lost her 19-year-old son in the Ukraine war. She only learned of his death 3 months later, through a state TV broadcast of a posthumous honor ceremony. And this mother represents thousands of North Korean families going through a unique kind of grief, not just the loss of their children, but the impossibility of crying publicly or questioning the circumstances of their deaths. Looking back on this tragedy, one truth stands out crystal clear. Kim Jong Un's decision to send soldiers to Ukraine wasn't a miscalculation. It was a deliberate choice to sacrifice an entire generation of young North Koreans in exchange for technological and financial gains. This operation resulted in what experts call North Korea's deadliest conflict since its participation in Vietnam. But with one crucial difference: in Vietnam, North Korean soldiers mostly operated air defense systems far from the front lines. In Ukraine, they were used as disposable shock infantry. The regime got its technological goals, but the cost was extraordinary, not just in lost lives, but in the destruction of the invincible army image it spent decades building. North Korea proved to the world that numbers can't replace preparation, proper training, and functional equipment. The final truth is simple and devastating. North Korea sacrificed its own sons on the altar of geopolitical ambition, and the world watched every moment of this avoidable tragedy. This wasn't a story about military capabilities or geopolitical strategies. It was a story about how dictators can turn young lives full of potential into statistics of a failed military experiment. The price of this lesson was paid in North Korean blood, and that debt can never be repaid.